Well, good morning everybody and welcome to the Dorset Council Northern Area Planning Committee on Tuesday the 11th of January. I am Councillor Sherry Jesperson and I'm chair of this committee. Committee members present today are Councillors John Andrews, Tim Cook, Les Fry, Matt Hall, Brian Heatley, Carol Jones, Stella Jones, Emma Parker, Mary Penfold, Val Pothecary and Belinda Rideout. We also have a number of Dorset Council officers who will be supporting this meeting today, and they are Anna Lee, Service Manager for Development Management and Enforcement, Hannah Smith, Area Planning Manager, Simon Sharp, Senior Planning Officer, Ross Callahan, Senior Planning Officer, Hugh Williams, Senior Planning Officer, Jenny Roberts, Senior Planning Officer, Annabelle Cox, Planning Officer, Phil Crowther is our solicitor, Steve Savage is from Highways, Transport Development Manager from Highways, George Dare is our Democratic Services Officer, Kerry Oliver and Lillian Board are producing the meeting behind the scenes, and our representations are being read today by Nicola Holsworth. So you're all very welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a change to our published agenda today. Officers need a little more time to gather some particular information for the Sandringham Sports Centre application. So this item will be moved till the last slot in the end of the afternoon, which will give the officers enough time to gather this information. This means that we will break for lunch after item 4B, the Winkham Lane in Shaftesbury, and we will reconvene at 2 o'clock. A word, if I may, about procedures for the benefit of people viewing the meeting. For each application, I will invite the case officer to present their report and recommendations, followed by presentations from other officers as appropriate. Members of the public have been invited to submit written representations, which have all been read by committee members. Up to 3 submissions in support and 3 against may be read to the committee meeting this morning by a council officer. Any submissions from the town council or parish council is then read. The ward member may address the committee, and finally the applicant submission is heard. Following these representations, members can ask any questions for clarification. The committee will then deliberate and come to a view. In line with Dorset Council's COVID protocols, for today's meeting, members will express a minded to decision in respect of the recommendations set out in the officer's report. The decision will then be taken under officer delegated authority in the light of the minded to decision. Today, our decisions are being taken by Anna Lee on our behalf. So to our agenda then. Are there any apologies? George, do we have any apologies for absence?
We have Councillor Val Pothecary, who has given her apologies for the afternoon session.
That's lovely, thank you. Members, do any of you need to declare an interest in any of the items before us today? I'm seeing nothing. It goes without saying that if anything occurs to you during the course of the meeting, you can always interrupt. Public participation is covered there, and I've covered. So to our first agenda item, application for the day, item 4A, to erect a yoga studio and associated change of use to bed and breakfast at Grove Farm in Chappymore. This application, you remember, was withdrawn from our last committee meeting while further information was gathered, and that has now all been done. So Simon Sharp is going to present his report. Simon, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this application is in Bolton in the north of the county. What I'll do, Chair, is I'll share my screen and we'll go through these slides, and then I'll talk about some of the main issues, policy issues surrounding the application. Just checking, members, that you can see the shared screen.
Yes, we can see. Thank you.
Thank you. So the application site is denoted by the red line on the plan before you. The blue line is land, also in the applicant's control. What you'll see here is, and you'll see from the photographs and satellite images in a moment, is the red line is restricted to a tighter area than the curtilage of the site as it appears on the ground. There is also, as you'll see from the photographs and images in a moment or so, a boundary between the applicant's ownership and the adjoining Grove House, which is a dwelling and also a listed building. And that juxtaposition is quite key to the determination of the application in terms of both the setting of that listed building and also residential amenity impacts arising from the proposal. And members, you'll see the distance between, or the lack of distance between, the site boundary and this common property boundary with Grove House here. Just for members to get their bearings of where we are, this is the old A303 through Bolton. The bypass is further south again. The county boundary with Somerset is just up here, not too far away from the site at all. And the centre of Bolton on the old A303 is is towards this area here. So the edge of the village is here, and the site is in visual terms and in planning policy terms in the countryside. So this is the satellite image. So this shows the applicant's existing home, which is subject to the proposed change of use, as is this outbuilding here, which is in the applicant's control. These are shared outbuildings or applicants in where there's a party wall halfway down the outbuilding, and this is the neighbouring listed building. And there I've annotated it on the next screen. So this listed building, their access comes from here, from Chatham Hill, and the applicant's home and their land has a separate point of access from the adopted highway here. It is clear from history that it all was one farm holding and was divided a number of years ago. So on to the proposal. This plan I've repeated a few times during the presentation for clarity, members. So in essence, it's in two interrelated parts. The first is the erection of a new building, which is the yoga studio just north of the pond within the applicant's garden. So that's the yoga studio. There will be images and elevations later. And then there'll be the change of use of the applicant's home, retaining owner's accommodation within the building. So the change of use to B&B accommodation, along with what's referred to as the cottage, which is actually one of the outbuildings here, entirely in the applicant's control. And you can see there's the access, the existing access, vehicular access and pedestrian access will be used, albeit there will be changes to the point of access with visibility displays formed onto the adopted highway, and there is a plan showing that in greater detail in a moment or two. So there we have this plan in greater detail with the point of access. This is the Chatham Lane, the Chatham Hill, the adopted highway. The area shaded in red is the visibility display to be formed And as you can see from the annotation on the plan, there are a number of small self-set trees, many of which actually are an overgrown hedge that are to be removed to form the visibility displays on both sides of the access. There is one large mature ash tree which is just within that visibility display, which is to be retained. And as members will see from the officer's report, and Steve Savage is obviously with us today, that there is an agreement in principle that this tree can remain within the visibility display without impeding highway safety. And to mitigate against the loss of the trees, the hedging and landscaping within this visibility display, there is a new hedge line proposed. This is the area shaded in blue on this plan, and you'll see, members, that there is a condition requiring that the implementation of planting and maintenance of that hedge. Members may be wondering why this hedge row is not nearer to the highway, and that's because there is actually a wedge of third-party land between the applicant's land and the highway on the northern side, but this area is actually within the adopted highway, and we've had confirmation from that from our highways colleagues, from Steve Savage. So onto the photos, you can see how dense that hedgerow is. And, obviously, we've had, by the time this photograph was taken, the fall in the autumn. You can see the leaf litter on the ground. So there are a number of evergreen species in this hedgerow, which maintain that screening throughout the year, as well as the dense mesh of deciduous trees and hedging plants to be lost as well, but that, to say, is mitigated by that new planting. You can see from this photograph, members, why the visibility display is required, because you are on the inside of a curve in the road here, and visibility needs to be improved, because there will be, even with the conditions proposed limiting the number of people staying at the site, there will be an increase in the use of that access resulting from the proposal. This is from the south side, from the village side, looking again at the point of access shown by the arrow. Again, you can see there is the planting on the existing planting on the inside of the curve, some of which will need to be removed. It's within the adopted highway and is proposed to be removed, with the exception of that ash tree on that south side of the access to form the visibility display. Now we're on the driveway, the existing driveway, which is to be utilised, looking back towards that road frontage, and you can see that planting either side of the access, and where on the south side the new hedge will be planted. Looking now from that point of access, you can see the countryside setting, members. You can also see the undulating topography of the land. So this is the applicant's home. This is all their garden in the foreground. You can just see the pond, which is referred to on the plan, and the yoga studio will just be beyond that pond. Now we're looking southeastwards from that point of access towards, you can just see in the trees the listed neighbours' property, and the neighbours' access comes along this alignment. So Chaffeymore Hill and the frontage hedge are off screen just to the right hand side. And now you can see the listed building a bit more clearly, the outbuildings and the applicant's house. So now we're going to look at the B&B elements of the proposal, members. So just to refresh your memories, this is the applicant's home to be changed into the owner's accommodation and B&B, and this building here, and these are this is a shared outbuilding, and this outbuilding here is actually in the ownership of the neighbour's house just here. This is the owner's home, the applicant's home. You can see there is parking here, and there is also parking, as we'll see in a second, to the right. So this is the gable of that owner's home looking towards the neighbour's home, and also the courtyard space. This is a floor plan which shows how there are no actual external changes to the envelope of the home, but it shows how the area will be, how the rooms will be arranged with the multiple beds in the rooms. You can see how that will be arranged. Now we're looking towards, from just in front of the applicant's home, towards the neighbour's listed farmhouse, and we'll see in a moment a view back the other way. But members, obviously you've got two points to consider here in your considerations. First, the setting of the neighbour's listed buildings. That's obviously a duty under section 66 of the Listed Buildings Act. And then you've also got the residential amenity considerations of the juxtaposition of the neighbour's home to the site. So there again, you can see the parking in the courtyard in front of the applicant's home, in front of their outbuilding. So now we're in that courtyard, and there's a bit of a, at first sight, quite a confusing relationship here. So this outbuilding on the left is referred to in some of the texts as the cottage. So that is within the application site to be used for B&B accommodation. This building at the end of the courtyard is actually, despite the personnel door being here, this is actually in the neighbour's land. So this is the neighbour's outbuilding. And then this building on the right is outside of the application site, and this side belongs to the applicant. And then there's a party wall running beneath the ridge, and then the other side is within the neighbour's ownership. This is looking the other way from near to that personnel door. You can see the applicant's home, you can see the cottage building on the right within the application site, and you can see the shared outbuilding outside of the application site on the left-hand side. This just gives you context. This is the neighbour's listed farmhouse. So you can see there are a number of windows serving habitable rooms facing towards the site. And you can see it's obviously a building of architectural and historic qualities, hence its grade 2 listing. Now there's just the edge of that home, and now we're looking back towards the applicant's house and the shared outbuildings outside of the application site. So this is quite an interesting view, members. This is from the neighbour's garden. We're looking over their outbuilding. You can actually see the door to the garden is open, as is the door to the courtyard owned by the applicant. And the reason that both doors are open is that I'd come through that way at the invitation of the neighbour. So the courtyard is just beyond this building. So this is this is the outbuilding within the application site, and this is the applicant's home, both subject to that proposal for the conversion to the B&B accommodation. So you can see the juxtaposition with the neighbour's house and garden. So the camera was about here, looking over that outbuilding into the courtyard on that last photograph. So now we're on the neighbour's, on the applicant's land outside of the application site on a higher land. Just to give you a bit of context, looking south towards the hills in the distance. You can see the neighbours listed farmhouse. You can see the outbuildings here, and you can see the applicant's house. You can see how they're in the fold of the hill. So in a secluded position, benefiting from screening on all sides, and also from the fold of the topography. So now we turn to the yoga studio. So the proposed site is just beyond the pond. This is the boundary trees. There is a watercourse which is referred to in the officer's report. So this is the applicant's house. So this is the layout of that studio. There has been specific investigations into the foundations of this, given the proximity of the trees on the boundary, and I can confirm, you'll see the consultation response on the officer's report, that the council's tree officer team leader has actually visited and closely inspected this relationship and is satisfied that it's an acceptable relationship, given the details that are proposed for this studio, and that the trees will be safeguarded. So these are elevations showing how this studio sits within the landscape. There are visuals which have been prepared by the applicant also in this presentation. So that's the view back from that studio area across with the pond on the right to the applicant's home. And that's a 3D visual from a similar position showing the pond. Obviously, members, it's considered to be a relatively accurate representation, although this is obviously an artistic impression, but it gives you an idea of how the building will appear in the landscape. It has been very sensitively designed. It's obviously unashamedly modern and contemporary in its design, but that doesn't mean to say it won't assimilate into the landscape. And I believe that it really will. I think it's a commendable design approach that's been taken and has been carefully cited and carefully sized to ensure that the landscape impact is minimised. So that's how it will elevate and jetty over the land. You can see the piers, the stilts going into the ground. That's showing that sedum roof, which is referred to in the officer's report. So just going on to, because obviously the parish council and other third parties have made representations, strong concerns and objections about the proposal. The policy you see on the screen, members, is from the neighbourhood plan. So that's a made neighbourhood plan, so that's an adopted neighbourhood plan. So it is part of the development plan with equal weight to the North Dorset local plan. Indeed, it actually postdates the North Dorset local plan, so one could argue it actually has a bit more weight than the local plan. So policy 12 is referred to in a number of the representations, and I just think it would be useful for members just to dissect that policy. Because what I must remind members to do is that there may have been intentions behind the wording of the policy, but the policy must be read and interpreted as it has been written. So it says that the first point to note is that it does not distinguish between countryside and village locations. So despite the fact that this is in a countryside location, it doesn't mean that it still doesn't get support from this policy. So given that the proposal includes the owner's accommodation, then it is a working from home proposal. So there is that policy support there. There has been quite a lot of concerns about the local or lack of local nature of the tourism proposed, and what, as the officer has put in the report, as detailed in the report, there is nothing to say that the tourism won't be local in this proposal. It's fair to say that not all of the tourism proposed by this proposal will be local. There's nothing to stop people coming from further afield, but it can still be taken also as a local tourism proposal. And so, going on to the criteria, it does not involve the loss of the dwelling because the owner's accommodation is still there. Obviously, they contributes to the character of the area. That is a subjective judgment. You'll see in detailed in the officer's report that although the new element, the yoga studio, is modern in design, it does contribute to the character of the area. It's respectful to the character of the area, and obviously bringing a business into this area contributes to the vitality of the local area. It protects residential amenity by virtue of the conditions proposed, and you'll see there is a suite of conditions members about the number of people that can be accommodated on the site at any one time, and also the necessary interrelationship between the yoga studio and the B&B accommodation. In other words, people can't visit the yoga studio unless they are actually people staying at the accommodation. Now, you might say that, well, that contradicts the local tourism, but there are cases countrywide where people will travel very locally just for just to be away from their home, for the spiritual and meditational qualities of a retreat can provide, such as the one proposed. Does not adversely impact upon road safety. Well, you've seen the fact that the visibility displays are proposed, and also there are obviously the limits on the number of people, which ergo has implications on the number of vehicular trip movements to and from the site. And then conforms to environmental and other policies in this plan referring to the neighbourhood plan. Well, one of the policies referred to by the parish council of this is this policy 2 of the neighbourhood plan. So the first criterion of that policy is about removal of trees, and the parish council have highlighted this as a conflict. So we already know that there are trees to be removed to provide that visibility display, but they are in the highway, the adopted highway, so could be removed any time by the highway authority anyway. And in any event, there is the mitigation proposed, there is the response in terms of the new hedgerow, which actually, in contrast to the self-set trees and the overgrown hedge, will actually provide some betterment in terms of screening and biodiversity value there on that frontage, and will also ensure there's that continuous hedgerow, except for where the access punches through, as it already does at the moment. Criterion B, we've already talked about in terms of the spatial characteristics of the locality. You'll see from the officer's report of the lack of public visual receptors into the site. There are some views from the point of access, but I have walked all of the public rights of way in the locality, and none afford clear views into the site. There are some public rights of way further east and north, but the existing screening and undulations ensure that the site is not visible from those receptors. And the changes to existing boundaries and creation of new ones, we've just talked about that with the hedges of preferred methods of delineating boundaries. Well, where the hedges are supposed to be removed, that's going to be replanted, and there are hedges on those boundaries. And the other policy referred to in the neighbourhood plan was biodiversity. You'll see that the surveys are undertaken, and all the landscaping that is to be retained, and then also the environmental qualities of the new building to be erected, the yoga studio with its green roof. So I think in summary, members, this is a sustainable scheme. It is a scheme that is development plan accordant as a whole, so accords with the neighbourhood plan and the local plan, insofar as the local plan refers to the neighbourhood plan, or rather is you look at the local plan first and the neighbourhood plan alongside that local plan, and there is support overall from the two, reading them together. There are elements that are unsustainable from the proposal, but you must look at it as a whole, and it is overall a sustainable and commendable development. I'll draw your attention to the conditions which are considered necessary to ensure that there is that sustainability and that accordance with the local plan, particularly with regard to the traffic movements, and also with regard to the residential amenity issues, given that juxtaposition with the neighbouring property. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Simon, and excellent presentation as always, very, very clear. We now hear from Steve Savage, Highways Transport Development Manager, who's going to give us some more details on the access and the impact on the highways. Steve, if you wouldn't mind, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. As you've heard, the intention is that the existing access onto Chaffey Moor Hill is to be improved. Simon showed you numerous photographs which indicated that the visibility of the existing access is substandard, particularly to the south. And as the proposal represents an intensification of use of this access, the improvements are required in order to make it acceptable from a highway safety perspective. Now, the applicants agreed to provide visibility displays.
Sorry, Steve.
That's okay.
Could we have the slide with the access on it up on the screen? Perhaps Simon, you could put that up for us, or somebody, because I think that would be helpful to members. Thank you. It's there somewhere early on.
Sorry, I'm having difficulty moving the slides. I don't know whether the control has been.
So. Well done, well done. We'll get there. I think that was the one. Lovely.
That's the one. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you so much. Steve, carry on. I beg your pardon. Right, that's easier to see now.
Well, the applicants agreed to provide visibility displays taken from a 2.4 metre driver position, which you can see on there. That's the distance back from the carriageway edge into the access. And then there's sight lines are stretching 33 metres in each direction up and down the road. They're taken to the near side road edge to the south, as you can see, and to the centre of the carriageway to the north. That's where the approach vehicles arriving from that direction. Now to the south, there are some self-set trees and a small section of hedge that are currently located within the highway verge, which are needed to be removed to provide the sight line. As Simon mentioned, there is a mature ash, which is just on the top edge of the sight line, as you can see, the dashed line. But as far as we're concerned, this is only an intermittent obstruction, so we're quite confident that it can be left and it wouldn't impact adversely on the safety aspect of the application. The site plan showed parking for 8 vehicles, but as you've seen again from the plan itself and from the photographs, that there's plenty of space available within the site for parking. We wouldn't anticipate that the 20 people visiting the B&B would all drive their own cars, but if they did, I'm certain there's enough space within the site that would mean that they wouldn't need to spill out onto the adjacent highway. And you can also just note from the plan that there's a timber-clad cycle shed proposed, which should house 8 bicycles, which again adds to the sustainability of the site. Now, the anticipated traffic movements associated with the proposal are relatively low, and it's not considered that they'll have a detrimental effect on highway safety or the free flow of traffic in the immediate vicinity of the site. Hence, the Highway Authorities recommended a conditional approval for this development proposal, Chair. And I'm happy to answer any questions that members might have subsequent to this. Thank you.
That's grand. Thank you very much indeed. That's very clear. Now we have some representations to hear, which will be read by Nikki Holsworth. We have representations from 3 members from the Parish Council and a representation from the applicant. So Nikki, if you'd like to do your reading thing, that would be most helpful.
Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Peter Diggins. As an immediate neighbour of Grove Farm, I object strongly to this application, which is for a large commercial development in the garden of Grove Farm, currently a residential property in a quiet rural lane. The lane has no pavements and is a popular route for dog walkers, families with pushchairs and horse riders, as it forms the western end of a circular loop around the village. In paragraph 13 of this report, planning principles are set out. I quote from these below with my additional comments in italics. 13.2, promote leisure developments where identified needs are not met by existing rural service centres. No needs have been identified in this application. Pilates, yoga, Tai Chi, etc. are already provided in Bourton Village Hall and elsewhere within Bourton Village. 13.3, policy 20, that development outside defined settlement boundaries will only be permitted if it is of a certain type appropriate in the countryside, or it can be demonstrated there is an overriding need for it to be located in the countryside. There is absolutely no overriding need for a wellness resort to be built in this rural location. 13.4, however, there is no overriding need for it to be located in the countryside. These are the words of the planning officer. 13.5, policy 11 of local plan states that economic development will be supported in the countryside by enabling rural communities to plan to meet their own local needs, particularly through neighbourhood planning. As is evident from Bourton Parish Council statement, this development contravenes a number of Bourton neighbourhood plan policies. Furthermore, Bourton PC members have studied this application and are unanimously opposed to it, especially as there is absolutely no need for it. 13.7, policy 12, will be supported provided they contribute to the character and vitality of the local area, protect residential amenity, do not adversely impact upon road safety, and conform to the environmental and other policies in this plan. This application directly contravenes all of the principles of policy 12 of Bourton's adopted neighbourhood plan. 13.8, while no specific local need is identified, there is no reason to assume clients would not come from the local area. If this were true, why is there a need for a 20-person B&B? 13.10, the proposal is considered to be acceptable in principle. I would strongly suggest that the proposal is contrary to all the principles against which it is being tested. Bolton Parish Council and every neighbour in Chaffey Moor Hill objects to this application. I would urge the committee to reject it as a commercial development of this scale is unwarranted and entirely unsuited to this quiet rural lane. Okay, Helen Bedford. I am a neighbour in Chaffey Moor Hill. I look directly into Grove Farm and I strongly object to this application, which is for a commercial wellness resort unsuited to this rural lane. In section 3.0 of your report, you set out the following reasons for recommendation with my comments in italics. 1. Will result in the creation of a business to the benefit of a rural of the local rural economy, which is supported by the NPPF and Policy 12 of the Neighbourhood Plan. Bolton Parish Council objection to this application directly contradicts this statement. Support for local business development is accepted, provided they 12B contribute to the character and vitality of the local area. A wellness resort and 20-bed B&B is certainly not in character with the lane. 12C, protect residential amenity. This application does not. It will directly affect all of the neighbours. 12D, not adversely impact upon road safety. This application has large negative implications on road safety given the expected traffic. 12E, conform to the environment and other policies in this plan. The development will result in the destruction of mature wildlife habitat. I suggest, therefore, that this application breaks each of these provisions. 2. Represents a contemporary building that in size, design and siting terms will not have any material impact on the rural or landscape character. Given the demands of highways for a 66-metre entrance clearance, which will make the building highly visible from the lane, this statement cannot be substantiated. 3. Will not result in any material impact or to the outlook of oral amenity of any neighbouring dwellings. Is acceptable in its heritage, wildlife and highway impacts. I strongly suggest that this development will have a huge impact on the outlook and oral amenity of all the neighbouring dwellings. It also has material impact on wildlife by the destruction of mature hedging and road safety by the substantial increase in the traffic in the lane. 4. Tree loss is minimised to examples that are not worthy of protection and replacement landscaping scheme has been agreed. The 66 metre of mature hedging that highways require to be removed forms part of the rural streetscape of Chaffey Moor Hill. To say that this is unworthy of protection is unfortunate at the very least. The remedial landscaping offered is no replacement for the habitat and heritage destroyed. There is no support for this commercial development on this site by any of the local community and the parish council. It is entirely unsuited to this quiet rural lane. James Peddle. I am a neighbour of Grove Farm on Chaffey Moor Hill and strongly object to the application for a commercial enterprise, which is clearly unsuitable for a very quiet single-tracked rural lane. I would like to draw particular attention to section 4.0, key planning issues, and the case officer's observation of access and parking. Case officer notes in italics. Sufficient on-site parking available while sightline improvements onto Chaffey Moor Hill will ensure that the free flow of traffic and highway safety will not be adversely affected. Very simply, the application shows parking for 8 vehicles, including those of the applicants, yet the proposed B&B will provide accommodation for additional 20 persons. Given the applicant's stated desire for the yoga studio to provide space for other practitioners as well as themselves, it is fair to assume that this parking provision will prove woefully inadequate and that additional vehicles will need to be accommodated either on site or on the single track lane, unlit single track lane. Bolton NP policy 4 states, A, the impact of increased traffic resulting from development proposals should not detract from the village character and the rural ambience of roads and lanes and is a material consideration in the determination of planning applications. And C, any new development or alterations shall ensure that frontages do not become dominated by hard surfacing and parked vehicles. I would strongly contend that this application contravenes both of these policies. Despite the design and access statement having been amended circa December 2021, it remains grossly misleading since much of it is unchanged from when the application was merely for the yoga studio at Grove Farm. The claim within the DAS that the proposal would have no visual impact on the street scene is patently untrue. With regard to free flow traffic and highway safety, the highway's demand for a clear 66-metre visibility display onto Chaffey Moor Hill is a visual, ecological and heritage disaster to create a commercial entrance on what is currently a rural lane. It is in no way mitigated by the offer to plant a new hedge line some way back from the original. There is not one voice of support for this development from local residents on Chaffey Moor Hill, or indeed the parish council, who voted unanimously to reject the proposal and is utterly unsuitable for a quiet single carriageway lane. Bourton Parish Council. Bourton Parish Council objects strongly to this proposal for the following reasons. 1. The recent amended design and access statement contains a disingenuous claim in relation to the impact of the proposed development. The relevant quote from the DAS being, the proposal would have no visual impact on the street scene elevation and is obscured and hidden by existing mature landscaping with new hedgerows to reinforce this privacy. It is concluded that the development would not introduce demonstrable harm to the amenity of the neighbouring properties. This is grossly misleading. The impact on the amenity of neighbours and on the natural environment arising from the approval of this development would be immense. 2. The business envisaged at Grove Farm with its change of classification to C1 would amount to it becoming a wellness resort. The anticipated increase in traffic volumes would pose a significant risk to pedestrians and horse riders along Chaffey Moor Hill, a narrow country lane. This would be in contravention of Bourton Neighbourhood Plan Policy 4A Traffic. The Highways Authority visibility solution for the exit from Grove Farm onto Chaffey Moor Hill would entail extensive removal of a high hedge with many mature trees. Creating the visibility displays will have a highly detrimental impact on the secluded character of Chaffey Moor Hill, since, as directed by Highways, trees and hedging must be cleared, excavated to a level not exceeding 0.60 metres above the relative level of the adjacent carriageway. This would be in direct contravention of NP Policy 2, Settlement Pattern and Character, and NP Policy 6, Biodiversity. Should this application be approved and clearance of trees and hedging as directed be actioned, the yoga studio, attached decking and adjacent pond, which is already used for wild swimming, would be highly visible from the road, degrading further the setting of Chaffey Moor Hill. 5. Local residents have already encountered significant noise and unwelcome behaviour from current activities at Grove Farm, which has resulted in complaints being raised with the EA. Accommodating up to 20 guests in Grove Farm will have a much greater detrimental impact on this quiet residential area. 6. The site plan shows parking provision for just 8 vehicles, whereas given the nature of this planning application, the number of cars will be much greater, especially if yoga courses, etc., attract local participants in addition to those staying in the Grove Farms B&B accommodation. Parking for up to 20 vehicles, as would doubtless be required based on the change of use and activities planned, would mean that the frontage to Grove Farm would become dominated by hard surfacing and parked cars in direct contravention of MP Policy 4B parking. This application should therefore be refused. Rebecca Smith, Western Design Architects. We are pleased that this scheme is supported by planning, conservation and highways officers following positive and enthusiastic comments through the pre-application inquiry. Whilst the Parish Council supported the original proposal, they have raised some objections which are representative public comments following the change of use application. We would like to clarify and dispel any misunderstandings. The existing access of Chaffey Moor Hill does not meet current highway standards, but changes are required to improve the visibility displays in order to address the concerns raised by Dorset Highways. The work required will reduce the height of existing shrubs to no more than 600 millimetres, including the removal of some small self-seeded trees. This could be undertaken outside of this application using permitted development rights, but have been included as part of this application for completeness and therefore does not contravene NP Policy 2. The same visibility display improvement work was done at Chaffey Moor Grange, a wedding venue sited directly opposite Grove Farm. Other properties on Chaffey Moor Hill benefit from low-level hedging and walls to provide adequate visibility displays. The proposal would not have a detrimental effect on the setting and secluded character of Chaffey Moor Hill, but would in fact bring it in line with the existing street scene and character of the area. The applicant will reinforce the existing hedge line on their land to maintain privacy screening and to enhance local biodiversity. This screening will also mitigate any visual impact from cars on the site. The scheme would not contravene NP Policy 4C and 4B, as there is 233 square metres of existing hard landscaping around the house, which is ample for visitors, and no further landscaping for vehicle provision is proposed. Regarding NP Policy 4A, we would like to stress that the applicants will be living at the property, so no numbers of groups for multi-day retreats on the site will numbers of groups for the multi-day retreats on site will be limited to 150 days per year, therefore limiting vehicular trip frequency. The Transport Management Plan submitted explains the measures the applicants are taking to reduce vehicular traffic to the site, including collection service from the local train station. We believe the proposals accord with the neighbourhood plan as a whole, as does your own officer. The scheme has been sensitively designed with neighbours and character of the area in mind, and every effort has been made to ensure it sits sensitively within the wider context. It will provide a small-scale social enterprise within the community, contribute to the character and vitality of the area, and provide social and economic benefits. The proposal meets both the national NPPF and local planning policies. As such, there should be a presumption in favour of the development. I therefore ask that the committee grants approval accordingly. That's it.
Thank you very much indeed, Nicola. Very well read indeed. Before I turn to questions, I would invite Simon or Steve or both, if you want to make any comments on the particular issues raised by those representations. I would find it helpful to hear just a bit of clarification on the parking provision, for example. Anything else that you'd like to clarify?
Thank you, Joe. I'll defer to Steve for some of the highway safety issues, but just as a point of clarification, I'll just try and share the screen again, because there was a point made about the hedgerow removal, and I think it's just needs clarifying. So just as a clarification, members, I think there was a reference in one of the representations made about 66 metres of hedgerow being removed. Just to clarify, I think that's derived from a calculation of 33 times 2, which is actually the full visibility display to the centre of the carriageway. As you can see, that's the 33 metres, but there's only one small fraction of that area which is actually in the verge where landscaping needs to be removed. And there's 2 points there. Is A, that's significantly shorter than the 33 metres on that north side, and secondly, the depth of the vegetation actually extends back to at this point here. So there is actually, it's only a small percentage of the overall depth, and only a small percentage of the overall length of that 33 metres. And similarly, on the south side, the 33 metres actually goes to the near side in that location, but that wedge, as you can see from this image, there is still trees retained, and the hedge retained. It will be bolstered and supplemented by the new hedge, but you will still have the hedgerow behind. It's just a wedge of the landscaping to be removed. And then with regards to,
that's very helpful. So as I understand, you're saying that where we are removing those wedges of greenery, there will still be greenery behind.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you.
Also that it's obviously not the full 66 metres of the visibility splay.
Thank you.
And then the point about the parking, you can see that there is the people, I think, obviously have counted the number of cars which has been annotated, but you can see there is actually more space available, including the manoeuvring area, than the 8 cars. And because this is hard landscaping already, this is a parking area already. And the second point to make is obviously the sustainability argument that not everyone will arrive by car to the site, and there is the overall limit on the conditions. I didn't know whether Steve wanted to add to that.
Thank you very much, Steve. Do you want to add something to that before we go to questions?
Well, certainly. I mean, Simon's pretty much answered the points raised. I think what I'd stress with regards to the visibility is that the sight lines you see there are the bare minimums that we can work to here with regards to approach vehicle speeds. We're effectively working on a 25-mile-per-hour approach vehicle speed in both directions. From the north, I mean, Chaffey-Moor Hill itself is narrow in places. There's passing width in places. It is narrow when you come from the south, but by definition, the alignment and the width is such the vehicle speeds are low, unless you're a lunatic who wants to drive stupidly along there. So the safe, lawful drivers should be approaching at no more than 25 miles per hour in both directions, was my assessment. So we've deliberately kept the sight lines to a bare minimum to lessen the likely impacts on the hedgerows as such. And I'd like to think that this is an overall safety benefit in its own right for anybody who's going up and down Chaffey-Moor Hill, because you're unlikely to be presented with a car suddenly poking its bonnet out from the existing access. You can now actually see and be seen by that vehicle. With regards to parking, Simon has clarified that, but you've got a large area available for car parking. In highway safety terms, if the car parking was to spill out onto the highway, then people shouldn't be parking where they're causing obstruction or danger. Yeah. I can't see where you could actually park down Chaffey-Moor Hill without causing obstruction or danger. So our duty here was to ensure that we felt there was sufficient space to cater for up to those 20 vehicles. There is more than sufficient space in that site for that number of vehicles, Chair.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I'll turn now to questions of clarification to members. So first, Belinda Rideout, you have our first question.
Thank you, Chairman. I actually have some questions, 4 of them.
Yes, good.
Some of them, the first 2 may be partly answered, but not really to my satisfaction.
Right.
Firstly, is it really necessary for highways to use heavy-handed improvements to the access? I know Steve has explained, but honestly, the lane is a lovely narrow lane. It has tall, they're young trees, granted, they call them small trees. They're young trees, but they're tall, and it gives this lovely enclosed feeling to the lane, the ambience to the lane. And with the proposal to take out quite a few metres of the vegetation, that's going to have a profound impact on the rural character and the landscape of the locality, the visual appearance as you drive up Chaffey Moor Hill, and the ecology of the site, and it's in direct conflict with policy 2 of the Bolton Neighbourhood Plan. So I'm asking that again because I just think in the report it refers to, under traffic, page 12, bullet point 10, traffic, occasional use by clients. So it just all seems very heavy-handed to me.
Steve, should we answer that one first, one at a time?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, certainly.
Is it
Simon, would it be possible for you to show on your presentation the photographs that you have of the access, please? While we're doing that, Councillor Rideout, I was hopeful that the previous statement I made indicating we were working to bare minimums would suggest that we weren't being heavy-handed here. The advice that we're providing in this in the planning process is one of safety, and I'm advising that if you intensify the use of that access, you need to ensure that vehicles can enter and exit the site safely, see vehicles approaching from both directions. So the sight lines relate exactly to that, where I'd like to think we're not back to the old 80s and 90s where we used to give you massive visibility displays and there was no compromise at all. We're really minded here to protect the visual amenity and the hedgerows, etc. So we've worked specifically to that, and that's why the sight line to the north is taken to the centre of the carriageway. We can do that if we don't anticipate anybody's able to or likely to overtake in that direction. In the other direction, I took it to the near side carriageway edge because I felt that was maximise the element of visibility that we have. Simon, would it be possible is there one looking to the south of the entrance point? I mean, you can see from that, Councillor, that there are some species of trees that will need to be set back. I'm not an ecologist, I'm advising on highway safety. Simon's indicated that it's acceptable to take those out and retain the mature ash tree, which is just at the rear of the boundary. But in pure safety terms, it's not heavy-handed, it's what's necessary to ensure that you can safely enter and exit the site. So hopefully that's answered that query to your satisfaction, or maybe
Okay.
not.
Thank you, Steve. No, not totally, because, you know, I know this lane very well and it is going to have a profound effect visually. Anyway, moving on.
Yes.
Is there really enough parking on site
Why is it doing that?
for 20 plus people?
It's just normally at least keeps their video there.
So
Someone
we've
else
got a bit of
Sorry.
a bit of breakthrough from the officers, so we can hear your voices. Sorry, Belinda, carry on.
I'll carry on. Yes. So is there really enough parking on site for 20 plus cars? And you've got teachers, you've got the owners. Again, the report, page 12, refers to occasional clients. But you know, I've also read in the report that they're looking at having weekly sessions and workshops. So there's going to be this movement in and out all the time. So what I'm asking is, will people be able to drive in, manoeuvre and come out as and when needed? They don't have to, there's not going to be a lot of shuffling around, because I can't see when everyone's packed in tight, they're all going to be going at different times eventually. I can see problems and there's no turning circle. So could you explain a bit more, please? Thank you.
Simon, parking for 20 or more cars.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Rideout. So, as said in the report, obviously it's the balance of you start with the point of a location and what its sustainability is, how many people will come by non-car modes. There'll obviously be the servicing, etc., and deliveries for the site as well. That's accepted. So it's the residual car parking requirements. So the parking indicated on site is such that it's considered appropriate. It's probably best to share the screen again so we can have a look at that. Just waiting to be given control of moving this chair. Sorry. don't know whether anybody can assist me.
Simon control. Yeah,
I can't.
You should have control, Simon.
there you go.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. So this is Councillor Rideout, the parking area, which extends to more than the 8 cars, and there is areas for turning as well. From the photographs, it might be so there's parking behind these cars. There's the parking area here, and then into the courtyard area as well, albeit that, as you'll see from the application site, the area to the right is not within the application site, but there is a parking area. I think I fully accept, Councillor Rideout, your position that there could be stacked cars, so cars parked in front of each other, because that's the very nature of this layout, and there's that balance to be made there between the parking area and the landscape impact. But given the sustainability credentials of the proposal and the location, it is considered that is an appropriate amount of parking. I don't know whether, Steve, you wanted to supplement my response to Councillor Rideout's question.
Through you, Chair.
Yes, please.
I think the likelihood is that people will turn on site, Councillor. I think that anybody trying to reverse from the parking area we see shown on that plan along that access road and out the site would be a particularly special driver exhibiting great reversing skills. I think the likelihood is that the applicant will manage the site themselves with regards to where the parking is going to take place and ensure that there's a turning area available. I don't think there's any real escape in the fact that from what we've been told by the applicant, this is going to attract cars. It is car reliant. There's very limited public transport in the vicinity. The bus service runs very infrequently along the main C-class road to the south. They have mentioned about collecting people from the station in a minibus, and one of their initial ideas was some form of traffic management plan that didn't require any changes to the access, but we couldn't accept it because we couldn't actually ensure there was any control over that at all with regards to the movements and the collection and the like. So I think it's best endeavours on their part to try and keep the traffic movements to as low a number as possible. But again, as I said earlier, in pure highway safety terms, if there's sufficient capacity within the site to accommodate up to 20 cars, which I feel that there is no impact on the public highway as such. And if they did park on the highway and they were parked in an unsafe position, that's a police matter for them to move them along. So I think the reality is what you see there is a sufficient sized car parking area for that number of vehicles.
Thank you very much. That's very clear. Does that answer your question?
Well, not entirely. I have been on yoga retreats, and I know that everyone drives, and even local people will drive to it because the site is that far out of the village. So I'm not totally happy with that, no, especially if there's coming and goings. It depends how it all runs. If there's session after session and you've got people turning up and people going on, I can see big problems. Anyway. Next question, if I may, what is in place to protect the amenity of neighbours, particularly Grove House? And I'm talking probably more about the oral amenity, because as we've heard, this sits in sort of a fold of a hill. There is a pond, so voices, etc., will carry across the pond, so that there's all that to be considered. I've got no idea of times of activities when they're proposed. They're daily, will they be more than daily? The report again talks about occasional clients, but yet the applicant talks about regular weekly workshops and classes. Clearly is going to be very busy, so I want to know what protection there is in place for the neighbours, please.
Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Rideout. So I think it's unquestionably a material consideration, Councillor Rideout, the juxtaposition of particularly the Grove House neighbouring property. You've seen the photographs and the site plan. It was one farmstead once upon a time, and it is very close indeed. There's shared outbuildings, and you saw from the photograph, which I'll just put on again so members can refresh their memories about the well, just on the site plan. Here is the neighbour's house, and here is that courtyard with the parking, and this building here is part of the B&B proposal. So, you know, that's clearly a relationship which can have some residential amenity issues. You know, no two ways about it. And this photograph shows that relationship of that neighbour's house with this B&B accommodation, with the parking area in the courtyard through this little personnel door, and the applicant's house. So if we can refer members to this condition, there is a suite of conditions. So condition 3, which is the one which is restricting the yoga and bed and breakfast accommodation to be one single planning unit. There's condition 4, which is the no playing of amplified music or amplified voices within the site. There is the conditions limiting, there's condition 6, which is the no more than 20 persons shall be present on the site at any one time. And condition 7, there's the 20 persons bed and breakfast accommodation. So it's the suite of conditions, Councillor Rideout, although it is a judgment that has to be made by you members, because there is that juxtaposition of the two. It's clearly a material planning consideration, the residential amenity impacts. There is no condition proposed by officers, councillors, with regard to the operating time, so that there isn't that condition. Thank you.
Councillor Rideout.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I do believe, I think there should be more robust conditioning for this application should it be approved, definitely, for when things are going to happen, if they can happen during the day or in the evening, for the protection of amenity of neighbours. So I think that definitely needs looking at, but I'll wait to hear what colleagues say on the committee. Final question is, could you please explain the proposed traffic trip generation? I cannot agree with page 12, 6.9, bullet 10, that the business would attract no more traffic than ordinarily expected for residential dwellings. I just don't understand that, because clearly with it's up to 20 on site at any one time, that there is going to be a lot more traffic, and it will have an impact on the ambience of the lane and detract from the village character as per policy 4 of the Bourton Neighbourhood Plan.
Thank you, Councillor Rideout. Yeah, that's the applicant's statement, or the applicant's agent's statement, which has been copied in the officer's report. It's not the officer's opinion that it will be the same. There will be, and I think Steve's referred to it in one of his responses already, that there will be an intensification of the use of the access arising from the proposal. No two ways about it. At the moment, it's a single dwelling, albeit a large single dwelling, but the traffic movements for 20 persons B&B will no doubt result in an intensification of the use of that access, hence the requirement for the visibility displays to be put in place. Again, I didn't know through yourself, Chair, whether Steve wanted to add any points to that response, but yes, that's the applicant's statement, not officer's statement. The officer's response, Councillor Rideout, is there will be an increase in the use of that access.
That's helpful. Steve, do you want to add anything?
Well, just through you, Chair. Applicants say lots of things in planning applications, and particularly with regards to highways, and I think it's our jobs to make sure to check whether they're correct or not. And in this instance, I think, as Simon's just said, we don't agree with that assertion. There will be more traffic. I can't give you any figures, Councillor Rideout, because as it's a special case, we don't hold any data on our Trix database for these special types of uses, but it's dependent obviously on how they're going to operate it, as you say, whether they've got daily classes, weekend retreats, weekly events, etc., etc. The position of the Highway Authority is that we feel that Chaffey Moor Hill can cater for the additional traffic subject to the access being improved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, so that's the key point, that there will be more traffic, but it is Highways' view that the road, subject to the improved visibility display, the roads can cope with it. Is that
Thank you.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
good.
you, Chairman. I'm taking it all on board, but you can understand why I've got
No,
concerns.
we'll come back to you when we get to the debate, Councillor.
Okay,
Ryder.
thank
No
you.
problem. The next question, and could I have Brian Heatley's questions?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Simon for a very clear presentation. I'm wondering what the long-term scope of what we would be permitting here if we were to agree to it. This is an application for a yoga studio, and okay, that's what the current applicant wants to do, but it may turn out not to be commercially viable. It may be sold on to someone else, and I can imagine someone else may look at this site and think, well, what can I do with it? I do not know whether the planning permission as set out here really does restrict it to yoga. I suspect it doesn't. There's been talk of things like Pilates and Tai Chi, which would probably be fine. I've been to a place like this once for a wildlife photography course, and I'd imagined that the disturbance to the neighbours would be no more, no less. But on the other hand, despite the conditions, I can imagine someone seeing this as a site that you could use as a venue of some kind. Now, what is it that we would, in the long run, be agreeing by agreeing to this proposal? Or have I got this completely back to front?
No, you haven't indeed. That's a very good question. Simon, can we throw a bit of light on that? Because that's quite a key point, I think.
It's a very good point. Thank you, Councillor Heatley, for the question. So, and I didn't know whether Phil Crowther wanted to add anything in this. I'm of the opinion that because it's a single planning unit with the yoga studio and the bed and breakfast, that it's a specific sui generis use that would be granted. That's what I mean by that, councillors, is a use that would be granted that would not fall within any specific planning use class. So if we granted planning permission, we'd be granting planning permission for the yoga studio and bed and breakfast accommodation as the single planning unit, as a specific use. Now, if under the scenario, Councillor Heatley, that you painted, the site was sold and there's nothing in those conditions that would restrict a sale, and then someone, and I'm trying to think off the top of my head what other use could come in, but let's go with your another kind of retreat, which is not yoga or a yoga studio, then we would have to make the judgment as the local planning authority as to whether a material change of use had occurred from the use granted planning permission, and we as the local planning authority would be able to take and to take the necessary investigations and actions, if expedient to do so, should such a case arise. So I think in answer to your question is, no, it isn't explicit in any of the conditions that it is a yoga studio and nothing else, but it is my opinion as the officer that the yoga studio and bed and breakfast accommodation is a particular sui generis use, a specific use not falling within the planning use class. And of course, you've got the suite of other conditions which any future operator would need to accord with. But I think it's it's an excellent question, Councillor Heatley, and it's certainly one which is material to consideration of this case. I didn't know whether Phil Crowther wanted to add to my comments or not, or Hannah, for example.
Yes, the question then that arises for me then, which Phil might certainly like to comment on. So we've got the conditions we've got. As I think I've understood, if it were to be changed into something very significantly different from a yoga studio and B&B, so not a little bit different, but significantly different, that would be a change of use, so that would require planning permission. I think I've understood that. Now, my question is, are there further conditions that it would be reasonable and lawful and enforceable for us to impose at this stage, or have the conditions we've got gone as far as we reasonably can? Phil.
Thank you, Chairman. Simon has summed the position up well. The only gloss that I'd add on it, of course, is that a change of use can happen without planning permission if that change of use is not material. And so if the use was changed, we may not get an application, and we may have to make a judgment at that time about whether the change was material or not, and therefore whether we would take enforcement action. So there's the proactive, the applicant coming to us and saying, I want to change this, do I need a planning permission? Or if they don't, there's the reactive, and we would have to consider it at that time. The only other thing that I just want time for officers to consider is whether the recent changes to the use classes schedule, so the use classes order, would allow a change of use in this scenario whereas potentially a mixed use. So just want a little time to consider that. In terms of conditions, any condition has to pass the tests for planning conditions that members will be aware of, so that it's relevant to the application, reasonable in planning terms, enforceable, precise, and reasonable in all other regards. I think of the 5 off the top of my head. So if you were looking to impose conditions restricting it to specific uses, you would, in reaching your minded to decision, that you'd have to be sure that any condition passed those tests, and it was reasonable to impose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Councillor Heatley, does that answer your question?
I think so, yes. I mean, the essential point is that this is sui generis. It's not putting it into a broad class. And if there's a material change of use, something will have to happen.
Yes, that's exactly. We've got a bit of a backstop there. That's very helpful. Okay, did you have any further questions?
No, that's it. Thanks.
No, that's lovely. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Tim Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. Just following on from the discussion that was had earlier, the question that was raised by Brian, would it be reasonable, should we be minded to approve this application, would it be reasonable to condition it to the lifetime of the current operator's business as a yoga studio? That's just something to consider maybe by the officers. But my main question was regarding a comment that was made in one of the objections, that complaints had been put in to the Environment Agency, I'm assuming around noise and maybe the behaviour of people on site already. Can I just ask whether we've got any corroborative data to find out whether those complaints, A, were actioned, and B, resulted in any action or enforcement being taken against any individuals or the actual business owners themselves?
Thank you very much. Simon, do we know, I'm presuming if it's the Environment Agency, it was about the use of the pond. Simon, do we know more about that?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not aware of any. You're right. If it's Environment Agency about the pond, I didn't know whether it was referring to the Environment Agency about the pond, or whether it was indeed actually the council's own environmental health about the amenity and noise issues. In both instances, I'm not aware of any matters that have been raised, although obviously the Environment Agency were not a consultee on this proposal.
I think members need to be just be a little bit cautious here. Just because a complaint has been made and referenced doesn't mean that there was grounds for complaint. We mustn't jump to that conclusion. Would it be fair to say that if it was a complaint to our own environmental health, you would be more likely to know about that, wouldn't you, Simon?
We would, and yeah. I don't really think it's material to the determination of this case, Chair, to be honest. A, because it's not relevant to the proposal under consideration today, and B, it's obviously other legislation anyway, so it's not relevant to the proposal.
That's helpful. Thank you very much. Councillor Cook, did you have anything else to ask?
Yeah, the reason that I asked was the impact of whatever is happening on the neighbours, because I do appreciate, and I'm sure all colleagues will appreciate, the closeness of this business to, well, proposed business to the very near neighbours, and I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't any overdue impact or major impact on the neighbours' oral amenity, but I'm happy with the answer that the officers just...
Thank you very much. Councillor Mary Penfold.
Thank you, Chairman. One quick question. Could someone enlighten me about the upkeep of the actual sedum roofs, please?
Thank you. Simon?
Thank you, Councillor Penfold. So the sedum roof, there isn't a condition about the management of the sedum roof, but we visited, I say we visited the site, myself and Graham Cox, the council's trees team leader. So just for comfort and reassurance, member, Graham not only assessed the trees on the frontage, and his were the comments in relation to the trees coming out from the frontage, but also the trees in the vicinity of the yoga studio, and he passed comment, Councillor Penfold, on the sedum roof and about the conditions were appropriate for that sedum roof to thrive because of the sunlight which will be afforded from south, from the shelter provided by the trees to the north, by the moisture content in that area. So essentially, although there's no management in place, I know there's been concerns about sedum roofs in urban areas and where they dry out or where there's pollution affects them, etc. All I can say is that this was specifically looked at or commented on by Graham, and it is a good location for that sedum roof to thrive, if that answers your question.
Yes, that's very reassuring. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, I have no other questions, so I'm now going to open for you to have a discussion, and I'm going to ask Councillor Belinda Rideout to begin our discussion, if you're ready, Belinda.
Okay, excuse me. Thank you, Chairman. I still have serious concerns about this, despite everything I have heard. And my concerns lie with impact on the local character, particularly the lane, the traffic, to and from site, the parking, neighbouring amenity. I think that's a big one. And of course, setting of a Grade 2 listed building, Grove House, which is also very important. That's my main concerns. But what I'm hearing may be, I think other members might not think the same as me. So I'm turning now to conditioning and conditions. can we please make them more robust should members be minded to approve the application? I don't see anywhere on there that actually specifies the approved uses. The conditions talk about the yoga studio, but doesn't actually specify low impact activities only: yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi. Also, what hasn't been mentioned is the veranda. There's a huge veranda over the pond. It's beautiful, but they're also intending to use that. And I think there needs to be some restriction for the protection of neighbours in the neighbours' oral amenity interest. So I really still think there's more work needed on this application should it go forward. Thank you.
Okay, so you'd like to propose then, could we take those conditions one at a time, because I'm not seeing anybody else wanting to join the discussion at the moment. Simon, Phil, how could we tighten up these conditions with regard to the approved uses? We've had you've mentioned this already, but Councillor Rideout would clearly like some belt and braces here. Is there anything we can add? I think what Councillor Rideout is getting at is she wants low impact uses that will not be not have a high impact on neighbour amenity. Help us here. What could we do that would be legitimate?
Chair, is it okay to respond to that?
Please do, Hannah. Yes.
Thank you. I think if councillors are raising some legitimate concerns about neighbour amenity, and the surrounding residential properties are very close, as Simon's really comprehensively explained, I think if members are minded to consider that a condition's required that limits the use to the yoga studio type uses that you've explained, I think provided you consider that's necessary to make the development acceptable, to have that use on there, and it is what is proposed by the applicant, so it doesn't seem particularly onerous, we could look to word a condition that states that the use shall only be used as a yoga studio. Whether we want to specify every other use that it could be used for, I'm not sure, but yoga studio is what's been applied for. That's the wording in the application, and that would give some reassurance that it couldn't change use without an application if there's a restrictive condition that clearly sets out what we've permitted.
I think that I'm getting the impression from the discussion we've had so far that members might find that quite helpful. So can we hold that thought? But you're saying, Hannah, that it would be possible to do a condition of that nature and add it. Okay.
Yes, I think yes, I mean use classes do change as well, so it would give some security that if there were any future changes to the use classes order, that's set there. You know, if the applicant wanted to change something in the future that might not be quite in accordance with that condition, they could apply to vary the condition if it was something that would be suitable. So it doesn't mean that it couldn't be revisited if it was acceptable.
Exactly. And this would be for the purpose of protecting neighbour amenity.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think can we hold that thought, because I think we might very well like to go there. But I've got some more comments now.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just mention about the veranda as well? Is there anything we can do to I don't know, limit use of the veranda, maybe to daytime only, or in the summer, you know, you've got nice warm evenings, I can see people are going to be out there.
Yes, they are, but that's Simon.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Riley. I think, I mean, what I would say with the veranda is it is some significant distance from the neighbouring properties. It's on the other far end of the site. I don't know whether sharing the site plan is useful, Chair, again.
I think we probably remember it now.
Okay, that's great. So that is that distance. I think also, and just going back to what Phil Crowther was saying about conditions, the enforceability of conditions and trying to police when people are out on the veranda and when people are not out on the veranda, and the fact that you have to sort of walk across the veranda to actually get inside the building, and you know whether someone's actually en route to the building or you know, just stepping outside for a second, I think it'd be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to enforce. So I think, Councillor Rideout, my response would be that the distance, the separation distance to the neighbouring dwellings is sufficient with regard to the use of the veranda. Although I accept you are in that fold, and you know, noise can carry, and it is, despite when I was there, I went there at various times of the day. You hear obviously, because you do in that area, you all know, members, the hum of the A303, but it is actually a tranquil area. You're right, Councillor Rideout. But I think that distance is sufficient, especially given that there are other intervening buildings, such as the outbuildings and the applicant's house, and existing landscaping between the siting of the yoga studio and the neighbour's house. But it's a balanced judgment for you to make, members, indeed.
Yes, I think the view there seems to be, perhaps, Belinda, that might be a condition too far and would probably not be enforceable. But yes, anything else before I move on to Councillor Cook?
No, nothing else.
No,
Thank you.
Councillor Cook.
Thanks. Yes, I actually share Councillor Rideout's concerns about the actual use of the site itself. And something that just came to mind a moment ago is, in the spirit of agricultural accommodation buildings being limited to the lifetime of a business or a farming business, could we condition that? Going back to my question that I asked in questions, would it be reasonable to consider conditioning any consent on the lifetime of the current owner's business, to prevent possibly the business or the site being sold to another person or business which might be minded to use it in a different way?
I understand what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah.
Phil, I can see you've popped up there. You're going to tell us why this isn't going to be all right, aren't you, Phil? Is there any way we can condition it, or we should condition it, to limit the permission for the lifetime of the current owner's occupation or the lifetime of the current business? In other words, that they would not have a business to sell at the end of that, Phil.
So, thank you, Chairman. So effectively, what you're asking is, can we impose a personal condition? And to take Councillor Cook's initial analogy, with an agricultural workers dwelling, you normally wouldn't make it personal. You would say it had to be occupied by someone who was working in agriculture, so you wouldn't limit it to a particular person or lifetime. Personal conditions can be imposed, but they're the exception rather than the norm. So you would have to have good reasons why this owner was acceptable and another owner wasn't acceptable in planning terms, and why another owner couldn't come on and operate it in the same way. I
was suggesting that should it be a yoga studio, whoever owns it, whoever operates it, it's fair game, if you like. What I'm suggesting is that if it couldn't be sold on as a B&B with the possibility of it being maybe a small acoustic music venue or something like that, which it may well lend itself to.
Yeah, but I think we've covered that, Councillor Cook, in the condition that we've already discussed, that we're all quite leaning towards, is to limit the use to the condition that will limit the use to a yoga studio, for the purpose of perfect, so that condition will address what you're saying, that
Covers, yeah, okay, fair enough.
it's a yoga studio and it can't then become B&B with something significantly different without having to come back for a change of use. So it could change slightly, which I think is reasonable, but it couldn't suddenly become B&B with motocross and without having to come back. So I think we've covered that. Thank you. Councillor Fry.
Thank you, Chair. Just turn my camera on. I think we're overthinking this one. Is my camera on?
No, but keep talking and it'll come on eventually. Now it is. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're overthinking this one. It's for a rural retreat with a relatively peaceful activity there. I think the work on the lane will improve it. In the past, this building, the property has been a busy, active farm at some stage with comings and goings and tractors herring up and down and animals making all sorts of noises and smells there. This is a relatively quiet thing. The farm could have had a family there with 6 to 8 children there with cars, teenagers coming and going in their cars, herring about, and we would have no control over that. Equally, it could be a local shop there with all the comings and goings. So I think this is a relatively simple request to make. The access to the improvements to the access will actually improve it. For people, think of horse riders going up and down that lane, that will improve it for the visibility. So I'm happy to propose it as it is at this time.
As it is at this time, but would you be happy to propose with the added condition to limit the use that's been requested?
I don't want to handcuff the business too much.
You're proposing without that.
I think any major change, if it's, as Councillor Heatley mentions, becomes a photographic studio, then so be it. There's not much material change there. I'm sure if they want to change it to a disco or a party thing, they'll have to go back for a further change of use with it. So I'm proposing it as it is at this time. Right. I think it fits in. If there isn't the demand, then it won't succeed.
Right. That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Carol Jones, is there a seconder for that proposal?
Yes, Chair, Councillor Andrews, I'm quite happy to second that.
Right. And again, without the extra condition. Carol Jones.
Yes, thank you very much. I agree with Councillor Fry. I would say that when we look at policy 12, every single A to E was ticked. We complied with that. And the only thing I would say with a condition on, I think yoga is too narrow, but I would suggest perhaps a non-aerobic exercise studio only. So therefore you don't get the beating of the spin bikes, the weights, the etc. Because if you look at some sort of meditational exercises like Tai Chi, that's not actually yoga, and I think yoga is too restricted. But I think a non-aerobic exercise studio only would work. And in terms of the veranda, perhaps a stipulation saying that music accompanying the exercise can only be played internally, not externally. Those would be my only comments, and I wonder whether they can be taken on board. Thank you.
Our proposers and seconders, then, would you be willing to consider a condition that we have a music condition already? Is there any need to tighten that condition to meet what Councillor Jones would like to see here? Simon, remind us of the music condition.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So it's it's condition 4. No playing of amplified music or voices shall take place anywhere on the land, shown edged red and blue. So that includes internal and external. So anywhere on the land.
No amplified music anywhere, Carol. Is that enough for you?
So are you saying that they can't have the gentle meditational type of music within the studio itself? Because I think that would be unfair.
No playing of amplified music or voices shall take place anywhere on the land shown edge. So it's basically saying any amplified music.
I'm with Councillor Jones on that. I think that they need to have and want to have some music with it. They just don't want a disco.
Yes, exactly.
So I would like that condition
for the studio only.
If they had a radio going up there, you wouldn't hear it 100 yards away.
I think, Councillor Fry, that would probably be background music and not amplified music, though.
Yeah.
So I don't think it precludes background low.
It doesn't preclude them from having the
in the building
music that
itself.
you would have when you're doing your yoga.
The difficulty about saying you can only have music in the building, then that could be amplified loud music, then, couldn't it?
Yeah.
So I think it's the idea of the condition is to remove amplified, intrusive sound from across the whole of the site in total.
I can live with that. I can live with that, Hannah.
Good. So, Carol, are you happy that the music condition is already there?
Yes, thank you.
That's good. Thank you very much. What was your second condition you were saying, Carol? Sorry.
That it should be, the studio itself should be for non-aerobic exercise only.
Okay.
Because then you can bring in other forms of meditational exercise such as Tai Chi. But anything aerobic, you tend to have the loud music, you could have the spinning bikes, you'll have heavy weights machines and so on and so forth.
Okay, our current proposer and seconder are not inclined to go with the this extra condition to limit the use. Even if it was limited to non-aerobic, you still couldn't stomach that, Les?
I'm comfortable as it is there. I think any significant change of use there, I think it's been used for noisy, so I'm happy as it is.
You don't want to limit the use any further, right? Okay.
So am I, Chair.
Right, members. So the proposer and seconder is not. Is everyone comfortable with going forward with it, like without this extra condition? If anybody's going to really jump up and down, do so now and try and persuade your colleagues. But no, I'm not seeing anything. So I think we are. I think we've we've had a good discussion of this. Val Pothecary, Councillor Pothecary, please come in.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been listening very closely, obviously, to the presentation and the debate. I do find that policy 12 of the neighbourhood plan, I've always been very keen on neighbourhood plans, as you know, and I think the significance of them is really important. And I feel that policy 12 of the local neighbourhood plan has been met in all sides. I agree with several things that Councillor Rydad has said, but I am convinced, I have to say, by Councillor Fry and Councillor Jones. The only thing I wondered about an extra condition was an alcohol licence. Is there anything we could do to request that no alcohol licence could be given? Because I think any future use that could be very useful.
Simon, can we? That's a different kettle of fish, isn't it?
It is. That's my response, Chair. It's dealt with under the legislation, under the licensing.
Yes. So I think it's not within our gift as planning to limit what licensing do. So, but yes, but
that's right. When the test of the condition is it's related to it's relevant to planning, and it wouldn't be relevant to planning.
Yes. No. Okay.
Good. It's worth an ask, actually. It really
was. It really was.
If anybody wanted to change the use of that we I think will probably give consent for, it would be quite useful if it was no loud music and no alcohol. I think that could.
We've got no amplified music, no alcohol, alas, is out with our gift, I think. And I'm going to ask Belinda Ryder to have the last point here, and then I think we're ready to go to the vote. Belinda.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to say I cannot support this application. I certainly cannot support it without the conditions we mentioned. If it is going to go ahead, then it has to be with those conditions.
With the one condition that's on the table, which is limiting the use, yes. Yeah. And I'm not hearing any other support from the committee for including that extra condition, I'm afraid. No other support. So yes, but your point is well made, and your position is very clear, Councillor Rideout. I think so. We have a proposer and a seconder that we will approve this application as it is in the officer recommendation with no further conditions. And I'm now going to put that matter to a minded to vote. When I call your name, indicate whether you're for or against. Councillor Andrews?
For.
Councillor Cook?
For.
Councillor Fry?
For.
Councillor Hall?
For.
Councillor Heatley?
For.
Councillor Carol Jones?
For.
Councillor Stella Jones?
For.
Councillor Emma Parker?
For.
Councillor Mary Penfold?
For.
Councillor Val Pothecary?
For.
And Councillor Belinda Rideout?
I'm going to be different, against.
That's very fair. Okay. So that application now, that is carried and that application now is agreed. Thank you very much. Members,
Chairman,
yes.
still
Oh, but minded to, I'm
to
so sorry. Yes, I forget it every time. Thank you very much. That minded to is now agreed. I now must turn to Anna Lee, the Service Director for Planning and Enforcement, to give us her decision. Anna, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I confirm that I heard the full presentation, the representations and the debate, and I consider there's been detailed consideration given to the concerns raised in regard to this application. I agree with the officer recommendation and the minded to resolution of the committee, and therefore my decision is that this application will be approved subject to the conditions as set out in the officer report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you, Phil, for jumping in to remind me there. Members, given that we have a slightly more relaxed morning because we have moved one application, I would like, if you would like, we could now have a short break until 12 o'clock, a short comfort break, and reconvene at 12 o'clock. Would that suit everybody?
Yes, fine.
Perfect.
Good, lovely. I will see you all again at 12 noon. Thank you very much. This one. Just. Right, welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your small comfort break. So we're now moving on to item 4B. This is for 162 dwellings at Winkham Lane in Shaftesbury. And members, you had an update sheet which refers to this application, which the officer will take us through during his presentation. So we have Ross Callane, who's going to present his report. Ross, this is the first time I think that you've reported to this committee, so you're very welcome. We are always delighted to see a new planning officer. So over to you if you'd like to give us your report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good to see you all members today. Thanks for reminding me about the update sheet. Firstly, it includes an additional section 106 requirement. This is for a footpath link from the site to link to the public footpath that's along the western boundary as shown on the sheet. And secondly, there is some clarification to confirm that in terms of flood risk, the exception test is not needed. So if I may, I would like to share my presentation slides with you. Thank you, Chair. Just bear with me, please. Okay.
That's lovely, thank you.
Yeah, okay, great. So before us is a full application for 162 dwellings, a vehicular access from Winkham Lane, parking, landscape and open space. So here we have a constraints plan which shows the site marked in the middle by the yellow dot. As I said, the vehicular access is from Winkham Lane from the south, which is coloured in green, and that leads to the A30, A350 route that's shown in red. The land surrounding Shaftesbury that's highlighted in light red is the Cranbourne Chase AONB. This plan also includes the surrounding public footpath network. The routes marked green are within Wiltshire over the county boundary. So next we have an aerial photograph of the site marked in red. This is to show the surrounding built development and landscape. So you see to the west the A350 route, and beyond that is the Little Down residential development. I think part of that site came before the break. So it's recently constructed. Opposite Little Down is the Winkham Business Park, and we have a solar farm to the north outside the town boundary. On the southwest corner, you see the Ivy Cross roundabout linking to the town centre, and the A30, which routes towards the southeast. So the mature tree belt northeast of the site is the AONB boundary as well, and there are some neighbouring dwellings and agricultural buildings that you can see also near the site. And that large building complex to the southeast of the site is the Blackmore Vale Dairy. So here we have the location plan, just to show the more immediate context. So immediately joining the southern boundaries, the residential cul-de-sac of Blackmore Road, which links to the A350. You also have the cul-de-sacs of Westminster Close, Cranbourne Drive, and Tollgate Park further north along the northwest boundary. The other two boundaries face open land. And you see that the red line is Shamford on the east, which cuts across the existing field. So this is because the proposal would retain the bypass corridor, which is shown hatched red. So there would be at least a 40-metre width retained, which is supported by the County Highway Authority. So here are some photos of the Winkham Lane Highway. So these works are in terms of its widening to facilitate the proposed residential development. This was as approved by a separate previous planning permission. The plan below shows the current proposed four-arm roundabout junction adjacent to the application site and the dairy junction. This is again accepted by Dorset Highways. So these are some photos of where the proposed junction arrangement would be. So you have the application site on the left and the dairy complex to the right. So these photos show views across the application site from the public footpath N13, which is to the west and highlighted yellow in the plan below. So next we have some further views. This is from the Wiltshire public footpath along the northeast, which is highlighted in purple. You'll see that these views are framed by the existing residential development on the edge of Shaftesbury. So now we move within the site itself. So these photos are towards the Blackmore Road dwellings, the rear elevations along the southwest boundary, and you will see that the application site does noticeably increase up towards these existing dwellings. So these photos are northwards towards the surrounding open land. This neighbouring land also inclines considerably. On the right hand side, you can just about see the Winkham Business Park development. So now we move over towards the eastern side of the site, and we're at Winkham Lane, but beyond the adopted highway, where the red dot is on that plan below. This is also a public right-of-way route, as shown in green on the plan. So you see the land levels also undulate here, and looking at the right-hand side photo towards the site, you'll see that this undulation also assists in screening and filtering views towards the application site. And we have another view slightly further northwards along the public right-of-way. So we're now actually in Wiltshire, and along the AONB edge in red there. So in a similar manner, you see views are interrupted by the existing land levels and landscaping, and also framed by the existing development on the edge of Shaftesbury. So these further photos forms another view further northwards. Again, in a similar manner, it's restricted by changing land levels, and views are framed by the existing surrounding development. So as you go northwards, the land level declines, and actually the next available view back towards the site is shown here at a distance of about 600 meters. So the photo on the right is zoomed in quite considerably, and you can see the existing rear elevations along Blackmore Road visible. So the application site is lower and well screened in front of these dwellings. And here are the final viewpoints from the AONB. This is from the eastern public footpath, where the arrows are, and again you've got similar undulating land levels, such that wider views are screened, and the closer viewpoint on the left is again filtered by the existing development on the higher ground. So here we have the proposed site plan on the right-hand side for 162 dwellings, and in comparison we have the 2016 approved development for 191 dwellings. This includes a small parcel to the south, which no longer is within the applicant's control. But also of note is that within the larger northern parcel, 12 fewer dwellings are now proposed from what were previously approved. So this assists in creating a looser and less formal layout. We have an increase in detached dwellings at the expense of terraced units. And through the current application, further amendments have been received to address many of the consultee comments. These changes include replacing all 3-storey flat buildings with dwellings, an increased proportion of red brick and stone elevations. We've got more slate along the countryside edge, and improved open space layout. We also have an additional amount of affordable housing proposed within the site. As shown, it would be located throughout the development with integrated layouts and appearances. Apart from 1 2-bed flat over a garage, all affordable units would be dwellings with their own private gardens and thus suitable for families. This affordable provision also includes 1 and 4 bedroom dwellings to meet the full spectrum of demand on our housing register. So here we have some street scene elevations adjacent to the site entrance. So the street scene at the top faces the entrance, and also an area of open space directly in front of it. The other street scene wraps around and faces the countryside open land to the northeast. The overall development is designed to have 3 character areas. So here we have the streets and mews character area, which has the highest proportion of terraced and semi-detached units. But this would be enclosed by the existing settlement edge and also by the looser proposed development wrapping around the other side and facing the open land. So the street scenes here are within that streets and mews character area. They show a predominant 2-story height. The sole 3-story dwelling, as you can see, is located on lower ground beside a road junction to create a landmark feature. So next we have the central green character area. So as highlighted, this includes a local area of play facility within its open space. So you see the dwellings here are mainly 2.5-story, semi-detached and with a vertical emphasis. However, this creates a more formal and coherent layout around the open space and would also distinguish this area from the rest of the development. And here are just some further street scene plans of the proposed dwellings located around the central green. So the final character area is at the countryside edge. So this contains predominantly detached dwellings. All are no higher than 2-story. So this provides an appropriate transition to the rural edge. So the street scenes again show a 2-story height, with the sole row of terraces are to the south at an angle towards an area of open space proposed within the site itself. So throughout the overall development, you see that the dwellings are of traditional design. The final external material specification will be controlled by condition to ensure that they are appropriate for Shaftesbury. So a strong landscape buffer is proposed along the eastern boundary. This is to assist in screening views from the A1B that I had shown. New tree planting is also proposed throughout the development. Some of the proposed open space includes SUDS features that would actively integrate with the landscape. A local equipped area of play is also proposed up at the northern end of the development. Precise specification, implementation and management details will be secured by condition. So the proposal includes additional off-site improvement works further along Wincolm Lane, as shown here, towards the town centre. So this would be a further benefit arising from the proposal. This also has the support of Dorset Highways. The proposal is also subject to Section 106 heads of terms as listed here. These include financial contributions towards improvements to nearby open spaces and a provision of community hall facilities for East Shaftesbury. So these projects are identified and supported by the Shaftesbury Neighbourhood Plan. So all material planning considerations are outlined in the officer report, and the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions as outlined. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very clear. I think we have no presentation from Highways with this one, but I know that Steve Savage is with us to answer any questions. Is that right, Steve? You don't need to say anything at this point.
No, that's correct, Chair. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, so now we have some representations that will be read once again by Nicola. I think we have 5 representations from members of the public and 1 from the applicant. Nicola, over to you again.
Okay. Jeff Chown, we note the plans indicate connecting a new footpath to the existing footpath 3 at the north corner of the site. We draw your attention. This is not permissible. We draw to your attention this is not permissible. The footpath runs over land owned by ourselves, and we erected the fence along the northern boundary of the site over 30 years ago. Under the relevant Highways Act, we are obliged to maintain free and unobstructed passage along the route of footpath for the benefit of public pedestrians. We are not, however, obliged to provide access to the footpath by breaching our boundary fence. This could only be done by ourselves or with our permission. The current footpath is exactly that, and it is not for the use of cyclists. We are considering re-erecting the stiles at either end of our land that were taken down by ourselves some years ago to aid the free passage of walkers. Toward the eastern end of footpath 3, bounding the site, is a native indigenous hedge of many species, including hazel. Within the hedge is a colony of hazel dormice, which is a highly endangered species close to potential extinction, and it is therefore vital this area remains undisturbed. I believe this section of footpath 3 bounding the site should be redirected to within the site to preserve the habitat of dormice and to provide a feeding corridor for the bats that are colonised nearby and feed along the hedgerows of the site. Okay, Gillian Lewis. Following COP26 undertakings by UK Government and Dorset Council's declaration of climate emergency, please ensure that conditions are made to this amended application, which includes requirements for full environmental mitigation actions, including types of building materials, e.g. minimal concrete and plastics, sustainable energy generation, solar capture, sewage treatment, road surfaces, water runoff, and all other high impact aspects, so that this proposed development would meet 21st century climate risk reduction and environmental care needs. Please set an example and use this and all future planning development decisions to demonstrate Dorset Council's actual commitment to addressing the climate emergency. Lester Dibben. Please would members consider the impact of the development in light of the design statement adopted into the local plan, the COP26 measures, and the further impact of so much more residential development while so much of the promised infrastructure remains undelivered. I am concerned Shaftesbury Town Council called off its P&H committee meeting of the 4th of January 2022. This has left a hole in the proper procedure to allow Shaftesbury residents a voice. Where I note the application will not be turned down, one would expect that all climate measures possible would be imposed onto this site before the final decision is made. It appears they are not. I note the Dorset Council declared a climate emergency as a result of appropriate measures must be put in place. Otherwise, it would seem a pointless declaration. DC elected members have held no public event or held a STC meeting to ensure all the long list of promises in the adopted design statement reference the inquiry by design process held over 3.5 years under my chairmanship, working with the Prince's Trust. This is when added to the current climate disaster requires immediate action to ensure no further damage is done. Please note most of the promised infrastructure still remains undelivered. Proactive support for the community interest company proposals, well supported, would go a long way in addressing some of these issues before further development is undertaken. Indeed, I would expect all current developers to be invited to explain how they are going to fulfil the requirements following COP26 and the up and coming COP27. A public meeting for this event should be called. Please ensure me and the residents of Shaftesbury that the process will be delayed for a short time to allow residents a voice. Would you also provide me with Dorset Council's policy backing up its climate emergency declaration and its climate rescue policy, along with named officers and portfolio holders? Karen Tippins. I fail to see how this planning application of a further 162 houses can be granted with the current abysmal record shown by all levels of government in providing Shaftesbury with the required infrastructure to support the rapid town's expansion. Dorset Council appears to be withholding Section 106 developers' contributions from Shaftesbury and preventing the town from having the agreed and promised laps, cycleways, educational facilities, NHS support and the agreed spine linking road plus east of Shaftesbury bypass corridor. All facilities have been agreed and approved with each planning application for parcel 1 through to 700 houses of the east of Shaftesbury Persimmon developments, Churchill Housing, Coppice Street, 43 dwellings, Blue Cedar, Bimport, 15 to 20 dwellings, and now Red Row, Littledown, 170 houses. Promised infrastructure. Where has the Mabel Road link to Wincoln Lane Spine Road gone? This was a key section of the road infrastructure and was a planning obligation for Barrett's. Why has this been dropped by Highways? Where has the importance of the east of Shaftesbury bypass corridor gone and the impact of the Barrett development on making sure this is implemented? Why hasn't the land been secured for a new primary school in any local plan? Why isn't there an open and transparent audit trail of how Section 106 developers' contribution amounting to millions of pounds for Shaftesbury that have been collected by Dorset Council and released to who and on what basis and at which committee? Where are the promised cycleways paid for by Section 106 contributions to connect the east with the west of Shaftesbury? Where has the affordable housing contributions been spent on the back of building houses in Shaftesbury? Who is being allocated the affordable housing? Why aren't Dorset Council Housing Enabling Team proving to Shaftesbury of this constant affordable housing need is valid and is being correctly allocated? Why hasn't Shaftesbury been allocated 3.4 million of LEP from the central government for infrastructure? Why has this only gone to Gillingham? Shaftesbury has high priority needs for LEP and has increased in size by over 25%. An explanation is needed from DC as to why no new play areas have been implemented in Shaftesbury since 2015. People have moved into their new houses in Shaftesbury. There were promised facilities, and yet their roads haven't been adopted by Highways. They are living in building site type conditions for years. They have been provided with no play facilities, no cycleways, no promised community hall, just rows and rows of housing. Barrett's can't go ahead until Dorset Council sorts out the current mess in Shaftesbury due to excessive housing build with no infrastructure rollout. Liz Evans, Development Manager, Sovereign Housing Association. We are delighted to support this application by David Wilson Homes. Shaftesbury is an area of great affordable housing need and high prices, and approval will help significantly in easing this. We have in place a formal development agreement with them to deliver the shared ownership and affordable rented units on the site, which will be delivered progressively throughout the site. We are especially pleased that compared with the original application, the new scheme brings greater proportion of the affordable units on site, giving a greater contribution towards housing needs. We are satisfied that the units are appropriate in design, size and configuration to meet the local housing needs in the area. I hope that councillors will take this opportunity to positively address this key priority by granting approval today. Peter Yeo, Mappets Lane Community Land Trust, CIC. When considering what purpose the Barrett's Section 106 funds should be allocated for, please note that East Shaftesbury is already in great need of a community neighbourhood hall to cater for its already greatly increased population. The Barrett's development is not providing any community hall, park or play park. Fortunately, 6 permanently unpaid East Shaftesbury residents formed the Mappets Lane Community Land Trust CIC in July 2020 and have made planning obligation fulfilling bid to Dorset Council in 2020, updated in November 2021. To become nominated to take ownership of the Section 106 community land at Manpits Lane in East Shaftesbury and use existing Section 106 funds to deliver, own and manage the long overdue community hall, park and play park planning obligations at this location. A petition of 720 supporters was handed into Dorset Council in 2020 and 2021. The Manpits Lane community land is currently owned by Persimmon Homes, and the Manpits Lane Community Land Trust CIC are the only third-party body that has a planning obligation fulfilling bid and which they guarantee to deliver. The submitted costed project budget for this bid proposal shows that these community facilities designed by our architect and landscape architect can be delivered successfully within existing Section 106 funds. However, some additional Section 106 funds from the Barrett's development earmarked for a community hall and play park would enable an enhanced community facility to be delivered at the Manpits Lane Section 106 community land site, the only such site in Shaftesbury, to benefit all Shaftesbury residents and especially those in East, including the Barrett's development. John Gately, Barrett's Developments. Good morning. Firstly, my thanks to the officer for his thorough report, and of course, I support the recommendation. I must underline that the principle of developing this site has been accepted through the local plan, the draft Dorset plan, and previous permission. You may be aware that initial works have commenced under existing consents, including a revised access granted last year. This new application improves upon the previous one, with the main changes being providing 162, not 191 units by reducing density and omitting a small area south of Wincolm Lane, achieving more affordable 48 units, not 29, bringing the full requirement on site instead of 15% plus payment. A more informal design reflecting the countryside location with a less urban structure. Delivering a David Wilson scheme instead of Barrett, with more up-to-date efficient designs. We've worked with officers on amendments and agree that the design is, in their words, acceptable, providing an appropriate setting with sensitive countryside edge, including landscape mitigation and green space. Technical consultees are satisfied, including highways, ecology, rights of way, environmental health, drainage, minerals and trees. The few objections are mainly on principle and don't acknowledge existing permissions, but to address the Town Council's main concerns, there is no obstruction to the bypass as confirmed by highways. The eastern boundary is the same as before, other than a small drainage area. The housing stands outside the odour zone. Wincolm Lane can accommodate vehicle movements, and these are reduced from before. We comply with the affordable requirements, 30%, not 40%. We provide several footpath connections and policy compliant green space. We share the Town Council and AONB concern to minimise visual impacts, but there is little change from the opposite permission. In fact, there's opportunity for landscape improvement through details to be approved by condition. There are also habitat and hedgerow gains. Through our Section 106, many other benefits are delivered, including 31,662 for footpaths, 200,000 for leisure and indoor sport, 950,000 for education, primary and secondary, 54,594 for healthcare, 11,700 for libraries, 446,000 for maintenance improvement of existing green space, play and sport, 48,000 for allotments. If approved, we commence before spring, and these contributions would be paid in tandem. Overall, this application improves on the previous consent whilst bringing immediate gains, almost importantly dealing with the urgent need for housing, whilst the council's supply is just 3.3 years. all 162 units would be delivered within 5 years, with first completions this year, as well as providing homes on an allocated site. This would reduce the council's exposure at appeals on sites it doesn't want. So I fully agree with the officer that this proposal represents sustainable development and would respectfully ask members to grant planning permission. Okay.
Thank you very much indeed. Well read. Ross, do you want to make any comments on the points that have been raised before I go to questions? Particularly for me at least, could you throw a bit of clarification on the matter of the footpath, which I know you have it clear in your mind, but it's not very clear in my mind. So the footpath and anything else that you'd like to comment on.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So as set out in the update sheet, a footpath, a connection to the footpath to the west will be a requirement for the Section 106 agreement. We have agreed heads of terms, but the final legal document is not complete. So the precise location will be subject of this process. The ownership rights would be the applicant's duty to satisfy, and not the council's. Diversion of that footpath is not considered necessary, although the council would obviously have a statutory duty to consider any application that may be submitted. Yeah, I did have a few other comments to make, if I may. So there was a reference to dormice. So mitigation for dormice and other protected species are covered in the biodiversity plan, which is to be secured by condition. In terms of climate implications, so section 14 on page 24 of the officer report outlines the applicant's statement in this regard, and that includes incorporation of renewable energy generation as required by updated building regulations. In terms of infrastructure concerns raised, there is also a section on page 37 which covers this and outlines all financial contributions to local infrastructure, and I would also note that the applicant has got the agreement of a registered provider to provide affordable housing on site, and that it is a full 30% on site provision, which is complies with the North Dorset local plan. And I'd just like to reiterate the in principle support for this proposal. It is a preferred site for development under policy 18. Also of note is that the sequential test required for flood risk on page 35 did require me to look at a number of alternative site locations, and for the 162 dwellings proposed, none were considered to be large enough or appropriate in terms of sustainability and in terms of avoiding any other landscape or such impacts. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to questions, and my first questions are from Councillor Fry.
Thank you, Chair. Just turning equipment on. Bearing in mind, for those people observing this meeting, our hands are largely tied from the previous consents in 2016. And I note the comments from the Shaftesbury Town councillors about infrastructure, but the 106 money, anything granted from this development will support that. So my questions are around the comments, perhaps to Steve Savage might want to comment about the waste lorries turning. There's a lot of cul-de-sacs in this development, which will make it harder for lorries to turn and go around there. My second question is about renewables, solar, water recovery, air or ground source heating. I know that they are talking about sustainable houses, but I'd like to know more about that, please. But in principle, I'm happy to propose.
Let's have the question, and first of all, with regard to the waste trucks access, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reassure you, Councillor Fry, we've looked very closely at the submitted estate road layout to ensure that it's suitable for adoption. And part of the adoptive criteria is, of course, to ensure that the refuse vehicles can travel around the sites. I did note the comments myself from Dorset Waste, but I presume they were on the first iteration of the plan before we got our hands onto it and got the applicant to change it to meet with our requirements. So again, the assurance I can give you is that the roads that are offered for adoption fully comply with our requirements. They should enable refuse vehicles to traverse around the site without being obstructed by parked cars and the like. And if there are, I think there's a number of minor unadopted areas, some shared surfaces and the like, it'll be incumbent on the applicant to ensure that the waste collection can be made by ensuring that the residents move their bins to within the highway edge or provide bin stores and the like. But it's all been catered for, I can assure you.
Thank you very much. Are you satisfied with that, Les?
Yes, thank you.
And the renewables question.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Again, I'll just refer members again to section 14, and I know that doesn't specifically outline renewable energy proposals on site, but nothing forward at this stage has been put forward by the applicant in that respect.
Okay, thank you. So we are where we are on that one, Les.
Can we encourage renewables if possible, please? I mean, there's no mention of solar panels, and as we all know, climate emergency is here. It's real. Anything that they can do to help will be beneficial. 162 houses will generate a lot of electricity.
Yes. Ross?
Yes, sorry, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Perhaps members may and officers could consider a further condition to require submission of a sustainability statement.
That will be useful. Thank you.
Just thinking out loud here, I probably might need some input there from colleagues as to how we usually tackle this issue.
Right. Can you come in and help with this one? We're still on questions, but could we? This is the old chestnut that comes up every meeting. Why aren't we insisting on more? So that's essentially it. Why aren't we? How can we insist on more sustainability?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Fry, for that really good question. I think that the applicant's probably gone as far as we can insist on in terms of the planning policies we have at the moment. They provided an indication of how they're going to incorporate sustainable measures, which is largely at the moment being dealt with through building regulations. So the current building regulations will increase the standards of dwellings and incorporate sustainable features. Whether we can insist on a condition that requires something to be submitted, it'd have to fit in with our policy approach. And there's nothing specifically in our policy that says that has to be carried out. So I think we should probably potentially not go down the route of insisting on a specific technology. But we have got the reassurance that the developer is looking at this and will, through building regs, achieve a more sustainable construction than previously would have been required.
Thank you, Hannah. All noted.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Hannah. It's the usual question that we fall foul of every time, isn't it? We'd like to do more on sustainability. Councillor Heatley, your question, please.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to pursue exactly that point a little bit further. I read page 50, paragraph 14, and I thought, well, actually, this doesn't tell me very much about what this developer is planning to do. And in particular, the rather throwaway comment about renewable energy generation at the end. My immediate question is this. I looked through all the documents that had been submitted, and I couldn't find anywhere a discussion of sustainability issues in terms of the fabric of the buildings, or consideration of renewable energy options or ground source heat pumps, or anything, or any discussion of the viability of those things. Have I just missed it, or was it not there? Because we do normally get some kind of justification, a statement of what the developer is going to do and some kind of justification for it.
Ross?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So the section 14 of my report is lifted from, I think, the design and access statement or the planning statement from the application submission. So I couldn't find any further specific detail in the submission. But as my colleague Hannah said, we have to assess proposals based on current policies. So I think that may restrict us in terms of insisting on specific types of technology to be incorporated.
Quite. Hannah, I saw your camera flash on a moment there. Do you want to would you like to comment on this?
I think Ross summed that up
Yes.
well. Then I think we need to be careful about attaching conditions that we don't have the policy backing for. We don't have a policy that says that we don't have a planning policy at present that says that we have to incorporate renewable technology through condition, but it will be dealt with through Part L of the building regulations, which does include a requirement for some form of renewable energy generation. Whether we have to specify that through condition or not is outside of probably what planning needs to consider. But new developments do look at technology that has been discussed, such as air source heat pumps, potentially solar panels, ground source, but more expensive, but could be incorporated. I think we just need to be careful about attaching conditions that we don't have the policy justification to do so, but I completely understand the concern and the aim of wanting to do so at this point. I think if we attach a condition asking for a scheme of renewable, a scheme for sustainability measures, it's likely to reflect what the building control measures are that are controlled through building regulations. So we have to sort of consider what's the purpose of that condition if we can't go beyond in terms of what we're asking for in planning right now.
Yes, that's very helpful. It's very clear. Brian, it's unsatisfactory, but it is what it is.
I know it's unsatisfactory. And I fully appreciate we can't put conditions that are to do with specific technologies or how much of them or anything like that. But I do find it extraordinary that we can't have a condition that says we want some evidence that you've thought seriously about this and have thought about the site and what might be possible there and with the type of houses involved and so on and so forth. And I'd suggest that there is in NPPF 157 some support for the notion that we can actually ask for that. You've got to think about local requirements for decentralised energy supply unless it can be demonstrated by the applicant, having regard to the time of development and its design, that this is not feasible. So I do find it extraordinary that we can be contemplating accepting a development, and I accept for all the normal reasons we probably are going to wind up accepting it, but we don't even have a statement of intention here or of reasoning as to why they've got to where they've got to.
It's a point. I'm just thinking, I'm not sure that I think you're flagging up a general discontent with the application in saying that there's no evidence given to us in the report, at least, that these matters have been considered as we would wish them to be, and that what's on offer here is the end of a thought process that has come to this, and we see no evidence of that. I think that's very fair. I'm not sure at this stage, because that we would have liked that to have been done earlier on. I'm not sure at this stage how we can condition that. I think is that fair, Hannah? There's not a great deal we can do now.
It's a really good point that's been raised, Councillor Heatley. I think if you look at the NPPF paragraph that you referred to, the first part says that applicants must comply with any development plan policies or local requirements for decentralised energy supply. Yeah. So that's the key, isn't it? It's complying with the local plan policies and local requirements. We have generic type climate change type policies, but they say similar things to what building regulation controls, which is that you should look at sort of incorporating sustainable type measures into the scheme. But we don't have a specific policy that requires a particular approach in terms of specifics that we could probably condition. If you felt that you needed a condition, you have to think about the wording of the condition and what it would require and how it's required to make the development acceptable now in planning terms, and tie it back to a policy, because I don't think the NPPF gives that amount of sort of jurisdiction to place that policy on a condition on there. So you'd have to think about the wording of that and what you wanted it to achieve through what they would would they be submitting through the condition, and what would make it satisfactory.
What are we trying to achieve by condition, given where we are, Brian?
We're trying to achieve a situation where applicants who put large developments before us have shown that they have thought about these things in a sensible way.
Yes,
I don't think it's a terribly revolutionary proposition.
No, I just don't see that a condition will do that, because they've either thought about it or they haven't, and we're either going to approve it or we're not.
Come on, you could have a condition which said you're not to get on with this development until you have submitted to us a plan that sets out those sort of things.
Right, good. Could we do that, Hannah? A condition that says that we wish that the Dorset Council wishes to see evidence that they have considered the sustainability.
You could have a condition that I probably would say not pre-commencement, but a condition that says prior to any construction of the buildings, potentially at that point in the development, a statement that sort of explains how the developer's taken on incorporated sustainability features. At that point, they might be more specific because they would have had worked up plans and gone through the building regulation process, and we'd have some oversight of that at that point. If you've considered that's required to make the development acceptable. I just think it might be useful to have a little bit more wording on the scheme that you'd wanted to see. So measures for sustainability to be incorporated into is it more the construction of the buildings? Because obviously the layout is fixed as proposed now, so it's going to be more building construction measures, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Could you do that then? A statement explaining how the developer have incorporated sustainability features, and it has to be to a certain standard, so to satisfy Dorset Council's policy requirements, something like that. Well, because or up to Dorset Council's satisfaction.
Yeah, so prior to commencement of the development above damp course level, a sustainability statement that details the sustainability measures that will be incorporated in the dwelling shall be submitted for approval in writing, and thereafter the development shall accord with the agreed statement.
Would that do?
It's fairly broad, but it would mean that we'd have some sort of oversight of what they were actually doing to meet the objectives that they've outlined in their design and access statement.
I like it. Do you like it, Brian?
I think that would be an improvement.
I think that would be an improvement.
I think it will send a message to other developers sending us plans.
Exactly. That you don't get to just ignore all that because Brian's here on the committee to pick you up. Good. Can we hold that thought then? I think you've got the wording of that condition. We're still on questions, so I must press on. Councillor Cook, you have a question.
I had two questions. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Heatley. I'm very much in favour of what he has just proposed as a condition there. I think this might be for the Highways Department. The can I ask what traffic survey data has been gathered for the free flow of traffic along Wincoln Lane? And I ask this because Wincoln Lane is currently the only access to this site.
Steve, do we know about traffic survey data on Wincoln Lane?
We do indeed. They submitted a transport assessment in support of this application, which was basically a comparative exercise, looking at the 2016 data and then comparing it with the current application with the terms of traffic movements. I think the important point here, Councillor Cook, is I can give you some figures. There'd be less traffic than was predicted in 2016. There'll be 17 fewer trips in the AM peak, 18 fewer in the PM peak, and over a 12-hour period from 7 to 7, that's 152 fewer vehicular trips over the 12-hour period. So there will be less traffic. It was subject to the assessment. I think the important point here to bear in mind is that there might have been more traffic, less traffic now, but we've still secured all the mitigation measures that we were previously asking for. So the improvements to the pedestrian crossings as you go southwest into the town centre, the raised table junction at the junction of Sweetman's Way and King Alfred's Way, the raised table adjacent to the primary school. They've still provided all of this, even though they are generating less traffic as such. So hopefully that answers your question. We're confident that it was acceptable with the larger level of development, and even allowing for incremental traffic growth over the last 3 or 4 years, we're satisfied that the reduction in traffic movements is such that it's still acceptable, subject to that mitigation being carried out.
Thank you very much. Tim.
Thank you. I think if I can revisit this in what I'm going to say when we get to the debate stage.
You had another question.
I did, but what is the reason? I think this is probably for the planning officer now. There is an extant planning by design that was referenced in one of the objectors' comments earlier, that was looking at the inquiry by design for the whole of the development from the A30 northwest to this being the last parcel of land within that within the eastern development of Shaftesbury as a whole. Can I ask whether the inquiry by design outcomes are still valid, and if the current design that was being put forward by the applicant is in any way different to that, why has that now come to us as the preferred design rather than the inquiry by design process that took a long time and quite a lot of expense and people's time as well?
Okay, thank you. Ross, do you know the answer to that? Or Hannah might?
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Pick that
Thank
up.
you,
Yeah.
Chair. Thank you, Councillor Cook. It's a really good question that you've raised here. The inquiry by design related to the East Shaftesbury development. So it was a process that I think relates not to this site, but to the eastern development as a whole. So its findings aren't directly relevant to the site that's before you today. So I don't think this site is bound by any of the findings or the recommendations on that other site. What I think is relevant is the fact that we have to be satisfied that it's a sufficient design quality in its own right, regardless of what was found in the other case, because the other case did have, it was a long time ago, so it was a different policy context, different design policy context that was formulated. But I think what Ross has identified in this scheme is that the development has responded positively to the constraints, the A and B setting. It's got a looser density, more suited to that rural edge than potentially the previous scheme that had a slightly more formal crescent and square approach. So I think the answer is that we have to consider design in the context as a site, in its own right, and that there has been positive measures that have been taken on board by the applicant in terms of improving the design quality, incorporating some stone, better fenestration details with coins around the windows to try and make it sort of more, locally distinct. But that is for councillors and the committee to consider now and consider the points and look at the design in its own right, rather than the inquiry by design, which was a sort of a separate matter. I hope that answers your question, councillor.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it makes it clear that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hall, your question.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. The
Yes.
first one, slightly a technical one. Will all of the houses in this application being decided today be built under current building regs, or will any built after the 15th of June be built under the new building regs? Because there is a climate impact to that question.
Straightforward question. Ross or Hannah, how does that work?
Chair, thank you for your question, Councillor Hall. I don't have that information to give you at this point in time. Building regs, obviously a separate issue from the planning consideration that you're having to carry out today. So I can't tell you exactly what building regs they'd be considered under, but it would be the current ones that are in place at the time that are relevant to the development. I think that it's important to know it's of your determination today, but it is a separate matter and isn't material to your planning considerations.
Okay. Question number 2. A lot is made in this application about the dark skies system which is in place and the issues raised because of the proximity to the AONB. What's not clear to me through this is NPPF 176 states great weight should be given to conserving and enhancing landscape and scenic beauty within areas of outstanding natural beauty. I know we're not within it, but we're right on the edge there. What, if any, weight are we giving this to this application, please?
Ross?
Yep, thank you, Councillor. Yes, the site is near the AONB, but not within it. So, in terms of NPPF 176, you do then have to divide that paragraph into two. Really, there's now the final section of that paragraph. Now requires development within the setting of the AONB to be sensitively located and designed to avoid or minimise adverse impacts on the designated areas. So the report and the presentation, I hope, shows that through the reduction in number of dwellings, more looser development, the countryside edge character area, and the proposed landscaping, and in terms of utilising the existing land levels and surrounding landscaping, that the impacts would be minimised, and that the development takes into account the sensitive location and can be supported. Excuse me. I did also note the further comments of the Cranbourne Chase AONB team, and they commented on the proposed lighting condition, and they referred to as a Zone 1 area, but the Zone 1 is defined as a relatively uninhabited rural area, with examples given being national parks and AONB. So again, because we're not in the AONB, we're on the edge of the settlement. I don't think we can go quite that far, but we do have the proposed lighting condition, which will have to be complied with, and also in terms of the biodiversity plan as well. That also includes lighting control, so that there's no impact on protected species in terms of light spill. Thank you.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Are you happy with that? Thank you very much. Members, it's now 2 minutes past 1 o'clock. and so I don't think we're going to get this application finished in time to give you a good enough lunch break before we come back. So what I would like to do is continue. I have 3 more questions, continue on with questions, and then I think we'll adjourn and come back after lunch to have a proper discussion on this. I don't want you to be having this discussion against the clock, as it were, and we'll give it. We need to give it the time. So, with your agreement, I'll go to the end of questions and then we'll adjourn. Is anybody got any passionate objections to that course of action? While you're thinking about that, I'll go to the next question, which is Councillor Rideout.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. My question is also reference lighting, and I've been looking in the conditions and I can only find reference to lighting in condition 19, where it says no development shall commence on site until a hard and soft landscape scheme has been submitted. And then it's just 4 words together with any lighting. Given the importance of the OMB, the International as an International Dark Sky Reserve, I'm wondering if the conditioning is strong enough. I've got a question, just clarification. There are no 3-storey buildings on the countryside edge, but given the topography of the land, which it slopes up, then the middle section is going to be a little bit more visible, and they're taller dwellings, 2.5, maybe 3-storey. So are there any roof lights there that are going to cause any issues with the dark skies? If so, are they conditioned to have blinds? Also, the mini roundabout, that will have to be lit, and will that be lit appropriately given the dark skies? And also, a lighting strategy, does that include, or can it include, domestic lighting as well as the lighting around the development? Thank you.
A good set of questions. Thank you very much. Ross, what can we do with the lighting condition to make it give it a bit more bite?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Well, firstly, there is a proposed lighting condition, and it's condition 4, which states prior to commencement above dam course, a scheme providing precise details of all external lighting shall be submitted, the list of examples to, in terms of external lighting, to comply with the biodiversity plan, as I mentioned, which would require controls to avoid impacts on protected species. You queried taller buildings in the site. Excuse me, sorry, and roof lights. So, firstly, there's only one fully 3-storey dwelling, and that's actually like on the lower part of the development, more towards the south. It's one of the it's by the road junction of the main access spine. So that'll be on one of the lowest parts of the site as a landmark feature. So all other dwellings go up are mainly 2-storey. There are some 2.5-storey dwellings, and they're as I've shown, mainly in the central green character area. But they have small dormer windows on one side, but predominantly the development is of 2-storey, and will be viewed will be framed by the existing development that surrounds it. So we don't think it would be adversely harmful. In terms of roof lights and domestic lighting, there are some small roof lights proposed, and I note also the AONB team's comments in terms of restricting domestic lighting. But as I said before, the standard they refer to seems to relate directly to the AONB itself, rather than edge of town settlements that we're considering today. and you have to think enforceability. You would probably have to remove permitted development rights for domestic security lighting, which in my opinion is unreasonable for for an edge of town location such as this. So for that reason, I think for those reasons, I think the current proposed condition 4 is sufficient, and in combination with the biodiversity plan, would restrict lighting as much as possible. Thank you.
Does that satisfy you, Councillor?
Well, yes, in part, because I know some domestic outside lighting can be quite bright. So if there was some way of sort of damping that down and making sure it's more low level, that would be good. Thank you.
It's a question of enforceability, as I understand it. Yes. I mean, the advice we've just had from Ross is that, in his view, that probably wouldn't be a reasonable condition. So it's whether or not you want to pursue it further.
I'll see what others think.
All right. Yes. Do you have any other questions? No, Councillor Penfold.
Thank you, Chairman. One very brief question. Looking at the comments of the landscape officer, what proportion of the buildings will be in red brick?
What proportion of the buildings will be in red brick?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor. I don't have the precise figure in front of me, but the majority of proposed dwellings are of brick, and some are of stone, and some are of a lighter buff brick colour. So as part of the amendments secured during this current application, it did include a greater proportion of brick and stone at the expense of buff brick. But sorry, I don't have the precise breakdown in terms of numbers in front of me. But the application includes a proposed material site plan that marks the different materials for each individual dwelling. So that is also that I know that we've in terms of roofing materials as well, there's now more slate around the countryside edge as well, which is obviously usually less, which has less of an impact on wider landscape views as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Cook, you have one more question. Is it a question?
It is actually, yes. And it's also a note that the AONB comments weren't actually read out when our very eloquent reader was reading out. I think were they specifically left out, or?
No, we have the protocols to what gets read out, and if they're not among the first three. In fact, on this occasion, I allowed one under chair discretion. I allowed one extra.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
In the general public to be read out. So the readings have not had short measure this time.
Fair enough. No, I did note that more than 3 were read. I just wondered.
Because I allowed that.
On the question of affordable housing, it's 30% proposed. Should that not be 40%, because this site is actually technically outside the settlement boundary of Shaftesbury?
Hannah.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Cook. Good question there. It is actually the correct amount. It's 30%. The local plan specifies that within Shaftesbury or extensions to a settlement, it should be 30%. So it's the same level of affordable housing as you would find in the settlement boundary for our preferred areas of growth around town. So, for example, it'd be the same in Blandford. If it was a site just outside, it would be the requirement of Blandford. Not the countryside requirement, but it is a good question. But it is specified in the policy that is the correct approach, that we ask for the same amount on our preferred areas of growth, so 30% as would be in the settlement boundary.
So we are right in thinking that it is still outside the settlement boundary.
It's outside the defined settlement boundary, because the current local plan didn't alter the settlement boundaries, but it did identify the preferred areas of growth to meet the housing needs within the area. So the same as the Littledown site, its preferred area of growth, it was identified to accommodate housing growth, but the settlement boundary wasn't redrawn to include that area in the settlement, but to acknowledge the fact that it is to service the needs of Shaftesbury's housing. The policy reflects the fact that it should be the level of level of affordable housing for Shaftesbury and not the open countryside requirement of 40%. So it is correct.
It is correct. So thank you very much. So it is policy compliant, and it's worth just drawing members' attention to the fact that was mentioned in passing that I think you said we have got a registered landlord who is willing to take these houses on. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct, Chair. One of the statements was from Sovereign Housing Association,
Housing.
And they are the registered provider on board to deliver the affordable housing for the scheme.
Yes, quite a significant point, I think, members, for us to note. Even okay, that's the end of questions. It's now almost 15:15, which gives you 45 minutes only for your lunch break, which I'm sure will be sufficient because you're all so keen. We must reconvene at 2 o'clock because that's the time which we have advertised that we will reconvene. And then we will pick it up then with the debate and put this matter to a vote. So I'm now going to adjourn the morning meeting and I'll see you all again at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair.